All right. Now we've got people joining us. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here this evening and being here early. We were worried for a minute. For those of you that are joining us now, if you feel inclined, we'd love to learn about where you're joining us from. So feel free to submit your answers in the chat. I'd also love to know what brought you here today, or what are you excited about? Hello, Carrie from Santa Rosa, Forestville. Hey, Jacques from Santa Rosa. Fairfield, excited about Greywater, great. Windsor, hello, Christina. Windsor, fantastic. Santa Rosa, we've got mostly Sonoma County folks. Great to see you all. Petaluma, want to know more about Greywater hookups.
Sebastopol, welcome.
Great. Santa Rosa, oh, folks learned about this from the article. Thank you, Press Democrat. Looks like some folks know each other in the chat. I love it. Hey, Mariah. I know some of the folks on this channel today, which is very exciting. About Greywater hookups, fantastic. Sausalito, all right. Cloverdale, great. Thanks for being here, Nancy. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to give it just a couple more minutes to let folks join us. Thank you again for being here. All right, Lauren and Laura, how does this look as far as my shared screen?
Looks good.
All right, thank you. Jody says, so happy you are doing this. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Jody. Zooming in from Ukiah. Great. Pengrove. Catherine wants to water fruit trees with Greywater. Fantastic.
Water District in Rio Linda. Nice.
Yeah, works in the water district. Susan, I see that you have your hand raised. Unfortunately, we cannot mute you, but if you have something to say, please feel free to drop that in the chat. All right, our numbers are still rising. This is very exciting. For those of you that are just joining, we're encouraging folks to drop in the chat where you're joining us from and what excites you about Greywater or something that you might be interested in. And Fran, yes, this program will be recorded. Mariah brings up a great point. They say, I don't want to plant anything because I'm worried about water usage. I would love to use Greywater. Oh, she even mentioned shower to flower. Adam from Sebastopol using Greywater from an outdoor shower on a pear tree. Fantastic. Paul, you don't have to worry about not being muted. We cannot hear you. Thank you. Great. Well, I'm sure we are going to have folks continuing to join us for the next couple of minutes, but I really appreciate all of you being here right now. And I think we can go ahead and get started. We're going to cover a lot of information today, and we're going to kick things off with an introduction. So again, hello, and thank you all for being here this afternoon, or evening rather. My name is Liz, and I am the Sustainability Programs Manager with Daily Acts. We are joined today by two amazing partners and sponsors of this program who we will introduce briefly. But first, I want to give a really special thank you to the folks that made this program possible. First and foremost is the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership. Without that sponsorship, we would not be able to have this program and the two others that are going to take a deeper dive into Greywater. So thank you so much to the partnership for promoting this event and supporting this educational opportunity. And next, I want to give a huge thank you to Laura Allen and the folks at Greywater Action. Without your support and the partnership that we have with all of you, we really would not have the ability to take a deeper dive into Greywater and to be able to educate our greater community. So I truly cannot express enough gratitude to these two partnerships. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who are being here. We definitely heard you when you said you wanted to learn about Greywater, and I'm thrilled to see how many people are signed up for this evening's program. All right, bear with me as we slowly scroll through. All righty. So I'm sure there are a number of folks on tonight's webinar who have heard of Daily Acts before, but I also recognize that there are actually a number of new folks to our organization. So I briefly want to give an overview of Daily Acts. Daily Acts is a small and mighty environmental education nonprofit that takes a heart-centered approach to inspiring transformative actions that create connected, equitable, and climate resilient communities. We believe in the power of our daily actions to reconnect people to self, community, and place, which ultimately helps to heal our society and our planet. Our holistic approach starts in the soil and swells into culture and policy change. Through over 100 talks, tours, and trainings a year, we're implementing 3 interwoven strategies for systems change. First, we're working to spread solutions and models that offer skills, tools, and resources for folks to be able to grow food, medicine, habitat, and community, all while conserving resources. Next, we're strengthening community leadership by connecting leaders who understand the interrelations of social, economic, and environmental justice issues through our networks and our alliances. And lastly, we are working hard to build public and political will by mobilizing our community's power for environmental and climate justice issues. As I'm sure you can tell, our impacts are far and wide, but if there's anything that I want you to gain from this overview, it's the firm belief that you all have the ability to be the change that you wish to see in the world. And I'm so grateful that you're all here this evening to take a deeper dive into Greywater and to expand your knowledge on water conservation strategies. Next, I would like to pass the microphone over to Lauren Lum.
Hello, my name is Lauren. I am a program specialist with Sonoma Water, and tonight I am representing the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership. We are a partnership of 13 water agencies across Sonoma and Marin counties. So on the left there, you'll see all of the water agencies that have joined together as part of the partnership to bring to you water conservation information and resources, as well as on our website, the savingwaterpartnership.org, where you will find lots of tips for water conservation, for not only ways that you can be conserving during this drought, but for the long term. So making water conservation a way of life, and we are here to support you through these kinds of programs, as well as tips and videos, and we will be hosting the recording of this webinar after. And so, yeah, go check us out online and let us know if there's water conservation programs that you would like to see in the future.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Really briefly, I want to give an overview of how you all can interact with the webinar this evening. First, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please drop them into the Q&A tab, which you should see at either the top or the bottom of your Zoom panel. This is going to allow our host to make sure that your questions are answered. If you would like to interact with your fellow attendees, please make sure that your chat is set to everyone. Excuse the language on this post. Rather than panelists and attendees, make sure that the chat is sent to everyone. And lastly, this is going to be recorded. You will receive a copy of this presentation, and you will be getting some additional resources in a follow-up email that I will work to get sent out to you early next week. And without any further ado, I'd like to give a brief introduction to our panelist today, or to our presenter today, Laura Allen. Laura is a founding member of Greywater Action and has spent the past 20 years exploring low-tech sustainable water solutions. Laura leads classes and workshops on rainwater harvesting, greywater reuse, and composting toilets, and she works diligently to influence policy and codes for water reuse throughout the West. Laura, I truly cannot express enough gratitude and appreciation for our partnership, and thank you so much for being here this evening to educate our community. With that, I am going to stop the screen share and pass it over to you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you so much for having me. I love teaching with Daily Acts and all the amazing partners and people that are involved. So I'm happy to be here, and it's great to see so many people here tonight to learn about greywater. So I'm going to share my screen, and then we can get started. Oops, excuse me. So does that look okay? Let's give it a sec.
That's perfect.
Okay, great. And I can't see the chat when I'm presenting, so I'll do pauses for questions, and there'll be time at the end. And I did read the questions that came in so far, and I plan to address all of those, but in case something gets skipped over, make sure you ask again so we can get all your questions answered. So we're going to talk about greywater. Before we talk about greywater, I just want to mention water in general. When we turn the water on in our homes, for most of us, water flows out, clean, potable drinking water. It's almost like magic. We don't really have to think about how much we're using or where it comes from. But a drought helps us reminds us and that our water came from somewhere, no matter where we live, whether we're on groundwater or rivers or creeks, or we have our own well, or we have a city supply. The water came out of a natural source somewhere, and it's not in nature if it's coming into our house. So we have this direct tie to our natural watersheds and all the living creatures that live there. And many people don't even have an awareness of how much we use every day, even though we absolutely need water to live. So I just want you to think for a minute how much water you use each day. And the question I'm asking is like, how many gallons per day do you use? And if you don't know, this is a great thing to find out. It's very informative. If you get a water bill, you can probably find out. I'm not gonna, you all live in different places, so I'll leave your researching skills to answer that question. And it turns out on average, people living in the United States use more water than anyone else in the world. We use about twice as much as people in Europe that have a similar standard of living. And we use a lot more than people that have water scarcity. And I just want you to think for a minute why it is. Why do we use so much more water than places like France or the United Kingdom, where people have access to clean water in their homes for the most part? Of course, we know that's not true for everyone in this country as well as other countries, but the majority of people, what's the big difference? It's a huge, like double or triple even. And if you're thinking about the landscape, you are on the right track. It is our landscapes are the biggest source of water users in this country because we brought a lot of plants from other places that need irrigation to survive. And so we use a lot of water in our homes, we use a lot of water in our landscapes, and the water coming into our homes, for most people, after it goes down the drain, that is the end of the story. It goes away. We don't really think about it. And tonight we're going to be thinking about it, and we're going to be talking about what we can do differently. And as you're all very aware, California is in a drought. This isn't going away. We're going to be seeing more droughts, more extreme weather patterns, as you know, with climate change. And so this is a great time for us to rethink how we've been doing water in our homes, rethink what we call a wastewater, what we do with what we call wastewater, and our landscapes, what we're growing in our yards. So tonight will be a kind of big overview about greywater, with the lens of how can we shift what we've been doing and do something better that makes a lot more sense for everybody. So we use about half the water inside our homes and half outside. And of course, this changes based on your family and yard and all of that. But on average, it's about half indoor, half outdoor. And trees and plants and all these things outdoors, they don't need the same quality of water as we do. So that's why greywater is such a great source. It can be used in our home and then sent right out into our landscapes with some considerations that I'm going to talk about. And so when we have water shortages or times where we need to cut back, historically, you've probably been asked, stop irrigating. You have to let your lawn die, all of these things that were really important to do and definitely a huge value to the big picture. But just letting your yards die and not growing anything is really not going to create an ecological solution for everybody over the long term. And so Greywater is going to allow us to have lush, productive, lovely landscapes that don't need any potable water. The landscapes are going to look different than maybe your landscape has looked in the past, or maybe not, depending on what your yard is like. But you will be able to grow lovely plants that don't need potable water. And so tonight we're going to talk about kind of overview of Greywater. If you don't know what Greywater is, I'm going to give you the definitions, the really basic stuff to get us the foundation. And then we'll talk about popular systems. I'll give you a little bit of info about how they work, how much they cost, how hard they are to install, so you can start thinking about whether this would work for your home. And if you're a renter, there are systems that can work for you. We'll talk about regulations. We'll talk about health and safety considerations, and we'll talk about how to make this water a real benefit to your overall landscape. And I just want to touch on efficiency. You can save a lot of water just by simply switching out your shower heads, making sure you have a low flow toilet. About 35% savings if you upgrade your fixtures and appliances compared to an average home. And so if you haven't already done that, I bet a lot of you have, but some of you maybe have not yet. This is a really easy and effective way to save water. And there's lots of incentives to support you for that and lots of resources. So I just want to make sure that you don't forget about efficiency when you think about reuse, because we have to conserve as much as we can first. And we still have the nice showers and our toilets still flush and all that. Everything works great. It just uses less water. And then we can consider how can we reuse that water in our landscapes. So Greywater can save between 16 to 40% of water use. And that's a pretty wide range. And you might be wondering, why such a big range? And the reason is different homes that are already built, sometimes you can't actually access all your gray water. Showers is a great source of gray water, but sometimes houses are built with the pipes, slab on grade construction, the pipes are going into cement and are buried. So if you have a slab on grade home and you want to use your shower gray water, it's a major project. I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's just kind of unfeasible for most people. Whereas washing machines, you can almost always access the gray water from a washing machine, no matter how your home was built. So sometimes people find out they can't use all their sources. And also how many people, how much water you use, that changes a lot. And so to get savings with Greywater, you are taking water that you used in your home and now you're sending it outside and you're replacing irrigation. So now instead of watering with your hose or your drip system or your sprinkler, however you had been watering, you're now irrigating with Greywater. And that's the way you get water savings with Greywater. Water savings is a great benefit, but there's also more benefits to that. You can create habitat, you can manage stormwater, you can have moist hydrated landscapes, which can help with fire prevention. You can reduce flows going to your sewer or septic systems. You can kind of decrease the needs of our bigger infrastructure, and that can have community savings. And it's also a great way to connect you into water cycles, thinking about your water. Where does it come from? Where does it go? What are you putting into it? What's in those products? How do they affect the environment? So it's a great way to really start thinking more about water and making small or large changes depending on your situation to help get your home and your lifestyles more in tune with natural water systems. And in California, we have a lot of gray water. It's about 1 billion gallons a day, every day, that's typically, or for the most part, not being reused. So there's a lot of potential. There's your particular house, how much you can save. And then there's, as a state, if we really embrace this as an option, we could be offsetting a lot of water use and growing a lot of lovely landscapes without potable water. And I want to show you kind of what not to do. If you come to this class and maybe you go to the other ones, you read more, you get some information, your gray water system will save you water because you will be thinking about how to do that. You'll design it properly. The chart on the left is from a study that Greywater Action did with a couple of partners a couple of years back, and we looked at houses that had gray water systems. We looked at their water consumption data before the system and then after, and you can see the red line was before, the gray line was after. That's what you want to see. They reduced their water use. They reduced a lot in the summer, and they actually reduced some in the rest of the year too. That's what you should see and want to see. but not every single graywater system is going to give you savings. The picture on the right is a great example of what you should not do if you are trying to save water, which I think all of you are. This home, they heard about graywater. They said, yay, graywater, it's great. Well, I don't actually know what these people said. I just have this picture. I'm imagining these people thought, yay, graywater's great. We want to save water. We've heard graywater's good for fruit trees, and it is. So they planted some new fruit trees right in the middle of their lawn, which they irrigated with a sprinkler system. And instead of turning off some of their sprinklers, they kept watering their lawn. So now they have a green lawn and they have some fruit trees. So they have new plants, which is good, but they're just double watering them. So they didn't save any water. Just this picture can show you there's no way the system could have saved water. It didn't hurt anything, but it didn't give them the savings that they were probably anticipating. What they could have done was they could have planted their new trees, because the lawn is not suitable with simple graywater, and I'll talk more about that in a sec. They could have planted their new fruit trees, which are very suitable in a section of their yard, shut off the sprinkler heads or not, however they had been watering that lawn, not watered that area, and now the fruit trees are going to be irrigated with graywater, and they have reduced the rest of their irrigated portion of their landscape. So that's how you can get water savings. And I'm going to show other pictures of different kinds of yards that might be a little more easy to imagine how to do. They might look more like your yard, but if you do have a lawn, or if you do have something that you're irrigating, just make sure that you are turning off the irrigation when you put out graywater. So graywater, it is water from washing machines. I'm going to say washing machines first because they are the easiest source of graywater to tap into, and they're a pretty big user of water in the home. If you have a top loading machine, they produce about 30 to 50 gallons per load. Front loaders are less, 10, 12 to 25. The kind of 15 is kind of a typical number for front loaders, but of course there is that range. And some of the new ones are, very low, like 12, maybe even a little less. And top efficient machines, those are the kind where you lift open the lid and there's no agitator, it's just this empty drum. Those use less than the conventional top loaders, but they're still about 15 to 25 gallons per load. So if you think about your machine, you can use these numbers to give you a rough idea, and then think about how many loads you do per week, and then you multiply, and that's how much graywater you have that you could be using for irrigation. Showers and baths, these are another great source of graywater, though it can be harder to access the water. You do have to tap into the plumbing of the home, whereas the washing machine, you can get it right from the machine itself because it comes out of a discharge hose. So the showers and baths, you have to get under your house, be able to access the plumbing and alter it. Sometimes, again, like I mentioned before, you might not be able to do that in your home, or maybe you have a crawl space or a basement and you can do this easily. And if you can, then this is another really good source of graywater. And the last one is from sinks. Bathroom sinks, they can often be tied into the shower system and used rather easily. If it's a standalone system, usually bathroom sinks are not, they don't make enough water and it's a little bit lower quality. There's a lot more toothpaste and gunk and stuff in the water per gallons than other sources. So it's a little bit less desirable, but it can be reused. Kitchen sinks are a different situation. Kitchen sink water under current regulations is not considered gray water. Same with dishwashers. So this water you're not able to reuse legally, or it's very difficult. There's a few instances of permitted kitchen sink systems in California, but they're pretty rare and they were kind of exceptions made for these systems. So bathroom sinks, yes, kitchen sinks, not right now. And gray water is never from toilets. It's also not from washing machines. If you're washing diapers, cloth diapers with poop on them, that would have to go to the sewer, or you'd have to wash them some other way. So gray water doesn't contain the high levels of fecal matter that toilets do. And so is gray water legal? The answer is yes. There is a state code that regulates gray water. It's in the plumbing code, it's chapter 15. And some pump systems don't need a permit, and I'll talk about those, others do. And the requirements for your permitted systems are spelled out in the plumbing code. Some places it's very easy to get a permit, the lowest cost, like one-time inspection permit. Other places in California, it's challenging. You might be asked to do 3 different permits from 3 different agencies. So even in a state where it is legal overall, permitting can still be a big barrier, but it depends on where you live. And generally speaking, Sonoma County it's much easier than other places to get permits. So how can you use gray water? The first way is outdoor irrigation, and the vast majority of my talk is going to be about that because it's the most affordable way to use it. The systems work the best. It's just kind of overall the best choice for a single family residential type situation. There are systems that take gray water and flush toilets with it. And you might think, well, it doesn't make any sense, any kind of common sense to be flushing my toilet with drinking water. And that is true. But to get gray water, which is full of lint and hair and debris, to get that clean enough to go into your toilet tank to sit around for, overnight or however long it takes between flushes, and then to be aerosoled in your bathroom, to get the water clean enough for that requires a pretty advanced system that's going to be filtered and disinfected, and it requires frequent maintenance. So at the residential level, there really aren't great options right now. That changes when you get to bigger buildings. So you will see very successful large scale gray water systems that do toilet flushing. But if it's just your own home and you're the one taking care of the system, right now there really aren't good options, except for these little simple little lids that they replace your toilet tank. And so instead of flushing and just having the tank fill up, the fill water goes through this little faucet so you can wash your hands. So this is a really small thing, but it does make a small impact. And if you're really interested in not flushing with potable water, you might want to consider this type of retrofit that you could do in your own home. And so all the other kind of gray water systems are sending the water from inside out to your landscape. And so whatever you put in the water is now going into your yard. So this is a great time to think about, well, what am I actually putting in the water? It turns out there's just a few things you need to be avoiding to keep your plants happy. The first one is salt. If you think about a box of powdered laundry detergent, all that white powder, that is lots and lots and lots of salt. And if you're putting salt on your soil every day, every other day, over time, you're going to increase the salinity of your soil, and that's going to harm your plants. So you don't want to be salting your soil. So you don't want to use powdered detergents. There's lots of liquid detergents that are suitable for gray water, or there's kind of detergent alternatives. Boron is the next one. Boron is not toxic to people. So it's in products that are called ecological products. And it's true, it's not harmful to humans or other animals, but it is harmful to plants if there's too much of it. So you don't want to use boron, borax, any type of cleaner that contains that, or any laundry detergent that contains boron, because over time it could build up in your soil and harm your plants. The other thing is chlorine bleach. That will kill the soil microorganisms. We don't want to do that. So if you're going to use chlorine bleach, you can always turn off your system, or you could use a bleach alternative like hydrogen peroxide or ozone. There's kind of other alternatives, but not chlorine bleach. And there's a list up here, some examples. This is listed on Greywater Action's website, probably daily access too. There's lots of resources for you to go to find a suitable detergent. And they're not hard to find. You just want to make sure you're looking at the right thing. And showers, it's typically a lot less of a problem. All the things we use in our showers, the shampoos and conditioners, they don't contain very much salt at all. I've never seen boron in a shampoo or conditioner. So you should be a lot less concerned about what you use in your shower, except for cleaning products. You want to think about your cleaning products in your showers, because some of those are pretty harmful to plants. And so you can always shut off your system, or you could use like a vinegar-based cleaning product, or not a lot of it, or just being mindful of the cleaning products that you might use in your shower. And so another general consideration is that gray water is not potable. And this might sound really obvious, but if you think about it, if you go outside and you have a hose lying around and you turn on the water, we're used to potable water just flowing out in our yards. People put the sprinkler on, kids run through it. If you have a good hose, like a drinking water quality hose, you might even drink out of it. The water that we use outside is typically potable water. Gray water is not. And so it's kind of a mind shift. It's not going to hurt your plants, but it could be dangerous for humans because we don't want people to get it in their bodies. It could have germs in it. It's in the slimy pipes. You definitely don't want to be ingesting this. So your gray water system, if you're following the code, you're going to be considering all of this, but just so you know, your gray water system should never have standing water. The water should always be soaking into the ground. You shouldn't have puddles or ponds or anywhere where people could access it. Your gray water also contains nutrients. And if you think about putting nutrients on your fruit tree, that is a good thing. That's called fertilizer. So that's good that you're doing that. But if you were to put those nutrients into the storm drain or into a creek, that would be pollution. Nutrients getting into a waterway causes algae to grow. That takes oxygen away from all the other living things that need the oxygen in the water. So in the Greywater Code, and you should know that you need to be a certain distance away from creeks. If you live near a creek, there's going to be parts of your landscape that are not suitable to irrigate with gray water. You need to be at least 100 feet away. And then also storm drains, which are usually a direct connection into waterways. And the last one is food crops. You cannot water root vegetables with gray water. And that's because gray water, which is not potable, would touch the part of the food that you're going to eat. And that could cause a direct route for someone else to ingest it. Other kind of food like a tomato or an apple tree, you're watering the ground, the food is above the ground. So there's no contact between the non-potable gray water and the food. So it's totally safe to water food as long as the food's above the ground. That's why, trees are great, bushes, vines, anything where the food's above the ground. So basically root vegetables or maybe lettuce where the edible parts like touching the ground would not be a good option. And before I go on to getting into the systems, are there any questions about products or anything I've covered so far that I could address?
Yeah, there have been a number of different questions, but in relation to products, a few folks are asking about water softeners.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of skipped over that. If you have a sodium-based water softener, then that's not going to be suitable for gray water. It's too salty. There are potassium-based water softeners, and there are alternatives to any kind of salt. But if it's a sodium-based water softener, then that's not going to be good for your plants.
Great, thank you. And we've got a number of other questions, but I think it would be appropriate to hold off until the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start getting into the systems and kind of how this really works. And the first thing I want you to know about is mulch. And you probably think I already know what mulch is. That's such a common landscaping, I don't know, feature is the wrong word, but we use it in landscapes for lots of reasons. And in a greywater system, we actually use it as the filter. So greywater contains lots of stuff. It's got hair, lint, gunk, grease. It's not clean water. And if we put greywater right onto the ground by a plant we want to water, or even under the ground by a plant, just directly in the soil, it will clog up the soil and the gray water will start puddling up. It won't infiltrate. So we do need to filter gray water. If we try to filter gray water before it gets outside, then we have a maintenance challenge and we create other problems for ourselves and extra work. So with these simple gray water systems I'm going to describe at the beginning, we send all of that out through our pipes and our tubing, and we make sure everything's big enough so it doesn't clog. And then the gray water, which is full of gunky stuff and dirt, it lands into the wood chips, which is our filter. And so the wood chips are going to filter out all that stuff and let the gray water soak into the soil. The wood chips also are kind of like a sponge. They'll soak up gray water. So if one day we do more laundry than usual, or we take a longer shower, or we have guests, or something changes and we use more water, the wood chips are going to soak up that water and act like a sponge and then slowly soak it down over time. So they are a big benefit into our gray water system. They function as a filter, also gives us surge capacity. And we dig what's called a mulch basin. So this is just a shallow basin. So you get the shovel, you dig, and it's not too deep. And that's a place to soak up all the gray water. It's full of wood chips, and that's where we put the gray water, where it comes out by our plant. So you're kind of creating like irrigation troughs for your different plants, your trees and your larger plants. It also spreads out the water, so the gray water irrigates a larger root zone. So even though you might just have one outlet, it's going all through the bottom of the basin, so the roots of the plant can access water in a lot of different locations. We also use a diverter valve, and this is a valve that allows us to send the gray water back to where it went before. So if you're on a sewer system, you can redirect it to the sewer. If you're on a septic, it goes back to the septic. And we would do this in times where maybe we are using products that are not going to be good for our plants. Like we are going to scrub our tub with some kind of harsher cleaner once a year, or however often it is. We can turn it back, dye your hair, bleach your hair, use bleach in the laundry, or use wash poopy diapers, or any time where the water shouldn't be going outside, you just turn the valve and now it's not. So it's really convenient and it's really important. Also, if there's a lot of rain, if your yard is totally saturated, you don't want to put gray water outside when the landscape's totally saturated, because then the gray water could leave the property and go out and get into the natural water systems. So there's different kind of valves for the different systems, but they all should have a way to redirect the water back to where it used to go. And so when we start talking about Greywater systems, now this is a way where you're using water in your home and it's automatically going out to your landscapes. And these systems can be extremely simple. Like this picture on the left, there is a sink. It drains through a piece of plastic pipe. The pipe is going outside, angled into a basin near a plant. If I gave you guys a pile of parts and this picture, you probably could build this without any further instruction. This is very simple. The picture on the right, this is also a Greywater system, but it's a high-tech system or an advanced system. With the system on the right, this system takes in Greywater from different fixtures. It has a filter that removes all the debris. The filter then is automatically cleaned. It's backflushed by the municipal water supply to clean it out. It can send it to different irrigation zones. If there's not enough Greywater to complete the irrigation cycle, it can pull in other supplies of water, like a rainwater system might be added to this, or the municipal supply. And you can monitor it all on your smartphone. So you can imagine the complexity of this is completely different. The skills it takes to install it, the what can go wrong question, which you always want to ask yourself when you're thinking about a new system. The what can go wrong question is totally different. And the permitting oversight would be very different because there's a lot more parts and components. They're both a Greywater system. So there's a lot of misconceptions around Greywater, and I think they stem from the fact that Greywater can be the picture on the left or it can be the picture on the right. And if you don't have a shared vocabulary, it can be hard to talk about what it actually is you're wanting to do. Some people think that Greywater is expensive or Greywater is complicated, and the one on the right, that is true. Or they think Greywater, can't water all it can't go into my drip system and it can't be automatized like the rest of my irrigation, and the picture on the left, that's true. So just want to start out with that. There's a lot of different kinds of Greywater, and they can do different things, and they have different costs and complexities and different skills required to install them. The simple Greywater systems that I'm going to show you a couple of examples of this. These are the more affordable systems that are done in more kind of retrofits for, I would say, the average person or interested person. These are installed in many different types of homes, different economic levels. They're lower cost and work well for bigger plants. They do great for your trees, bushes, vines. Think about the size of a tomato, like a healthy tomato, like a big bush, healthy tomato plant, and bigger. Those are great plants to irrigate with a simple Greywater system. Lawns, which are lots and lots and lots of plants, or a bunch of flower, a bunch of little plants all spread out. You can't do that with a simple system, and it's just a logistical constraint. The simple systems do the spot irrigation. They go to a few different places and can water a few plants. Could be, more than a couple, but they have limitations on how far you can spread out the water. Lawns, a lot of tiny, small plants, those need a drip irrigation system, and that has to be a more complex system. You're never allowed to spray Greywater in this country through a sprinkler system. That's not an option. You might see like recycled water going through sprinkler systems, and there is water reuse happening in the sprinkler scenario, but it's not going to be from your residential Greywater system. So this is a really good example of a yard that's irrigated with Greywater. You can see trees, bushes. There's a lot of different smaller, really low water use plants that don't need any irrigation or just very little. And so this is the kind of landscape that these simple Greywater systems are very well suited for. So is this fruit tree guild, like where you have a fruit tree and then you have other plants around it. This picture has a lemon tree, and then it has different flowers and herbs planted around it. And you can see the little green circle in the in that mulched area. That's the basin, and that's where the Greywater is going. So this whole little region is irrigated with Greywater. And so one of these simple systems is called a laundry to landscape. The system is just from your washing machine. It doesn't need a permit in California if you follow some basic guidelines. And, this is a general presentation. So if you think when I talk a little bit more that you're interested in laundry to landscape, the next webinar is going to focus on that. So I'll go into a lot more details, but this is just to give you an overview of what the system can do, how much it costs, kind of basic stuff. So this is washing machine only. Your washing machine has a pump in it. It pumps out the water. And what we do with the system is we put in a valve connected directly to the machine. And then one side of the valve goes back to the sewer, as you can see in this picture. And then the other side goes out to the landscape. So you do need to go from the inside to the outside, either through a wall or through the floor and then out. And then you direct the water to your plants. The pump in the machine pushes the water through. So this can work on a flat yard. It's not for an uphill sloping yard, but it can be a flat yard and definitely a downward sloping yard. You're not altering your plumbing. Your house is pretty much exactly the same, except there's a small hole going through either the wall or the floor. The cost, it's usually a couple $100s in parts, and a professional installation, it's usually a 1 or 2 day installation, depending on your home. You might be thinking, oh, I have like a cement sidewalk right against my house. So to get from your side of your house out, you'd have to cut concrete, and that would take longer. So that would add cost to your system. Or maybe you have to go under a deck, or, there's a lot of ways a system could take a little bit longer to install. The picture you see is a very simple installation. So this would be a, just maybe half-day project to put this in. So it's a relatively small project for a do-it-yourself, or for your home improvement project. And it's definitely a do-it-yourself project. You can get a little more info, another webinar, a book, get the parts. You can definitely put this together if you feel comfortable putting in irrigation systems. Maybe you put a drip system in your home, or maybe you put up your fence, or just done some kind of basic home improvement projects. You can definitely do the system. And if you can't, then you can look for professional help. So here's some pictures. The valve is right in the laundry room. So it's right by the machine. It's very convenient. You can just turn the handle, redirect the flow. One side goes back to the sewer. One side goes outside. The picture on the left, the gray water is actually going through the floor. So this home has a crawl space. So it goes through the floor and then out to the landscape. The picture on the right, the wall is an exterior wall. So you can see the pipe is going directly through the wall. That little silver circle is where the pipe is exiting the wall. And then it's outside in the landscape. In the landscape, it looks similar to a drip irrigation system, except everything is larger. And that's to prevent clogging. So we're sending this kind of dirty water through these pipes. We don't want it to clog up, so everything needs to be big enough, and then it's landing in the mulch, in the wood chips where it is filtered. There's limitations. Top loading machines have more water, so every time it pumps out the water, you can go to more places than you can with a front loading machine. But they're all basically the same. You're sending the water out, you're having different outlets going to different plants, and the water is flowing through the system. This picture is showing a construction picture. So of course the tubing would be buried, the basin would be filled all the way up, and the lids would go back on. Those little black things you see are called irrigation valve boxes, and they're just preventing plant roots from later growing up into the system and clogging it. So it just creates a little air space. The bottom is totally open, so the water flows through the air and then soaks into the wood chips and then goes down to the soil to feed the plants. So here's some finished pictures. The picture on the left, those little circles are the different outlets, and they're in front of different fruit trees. So that's irrigating a row of fruit trees. The basin kind of blends into the path, which is also wood chips. So it doesn't really, there's not a lot of visual changes to that landscape. The picture on the right, that is a lot of different perennials, and there's a couple bushes in there, and the gray water outlets are all underneath the plant. So you really can't see anything at all in that yard, but it is irrigated with the laundry. And here's another good example of a gray water irrigated yard with a laundry system. If you look around, you can find the outlets. This yard has a lot of wood chips already, so you can't see the basins distinctly separate from the rest of the landscape, but you can probably find the little circles to show where the irrigation water is coming out. There's 1, 2 by those bushes kind of in the front of the image, and there's a couple in the back. So are there any questions just about the laundry system that I could answer before we go on to all the others?
There were a couple of questions about storage of the water.
Okay. maybe
Yeah,
we'll wait on that.
sounds good.
So now any other system that you do, any other Greywater system, you're going to be tapping into the drainage plumbing of your house. So the washing machine, you can get the water right from the machine itself, but everything else, like all the showers and baths and sinks, you have to be below the fixture and in the drainage plumbing. So now you're going to be changing your plumbing, so that triggers a plumbing permit and a Greywater permit. This picture is showing what that can look like. This home has a nice big crawl space. The plumbing was cut, that diverter valve was installed. One side's going back to the sewer and the other side is going out to the landscape. So it's the same kind of concept. It's just happening usually below the house. One way to use the water is through what's called a branch drain system. And this is just a name for a system. This system and the previous one was invented by a man named Art Ludwig from Oasis Design. And this particular system works on gravity only. So it's an excellent option if you have, number one, access to your shower drain. And then number two, your landscape is lower than where the pipes is, because by gravity, it all has to flow downhill. So if your yard is flat and your plants are close to the house, like within 10, 20 feet or so, this can work. Or if your yard is downward sloping, this can work, because all these pipes have to be sloping down. If you can do this system, it works great because gravity never breaks. It's always going to be flowing and doesn't use any energy. It's very simple. There's no moving parts. The water's just flowing out. It's being divided by a special plumbing fitting that splits the flow of water into 2 equal parts. So you divide up the flow in your landscape, and then you end up at your different plants. Of course, there's some design and calculations that you need to do with all of these systems to make sure you're matching the water to the plants appropriately, but I'm not going to cover that level of detail in tonight's talk, but just know that that would have to happen to make sure your system is going to work really well for you and your plants. So as you can see in this picture, the water's flowing out, it's being split up, and it's going to the different plants. Their basins are near the plant, and it's watering going through the wood chips. The parts are usually a little more expensive than the laundry system, and the installation, if you hire someone, it's usually quite a bit more because this is a lot more labor intensive to slope the pipes, and it also requires a plumbing alteration. This could be a do-it-yourself project if you have, if you know how to do plumbing, then you could do any scenario you would encounter. But if you aren't really too experienced with plumbing, if you have minimal plumbing skills and your house is made out of plastic pipe, the ABS black plastic, it's relatively straightforward to cut in this valve, and you could definitely do it yourself. But if your home is older and you don't have a lot of plumbing experience and you have metal pipes or any kind of more challenging situation, then you would definitely want a plumber to put in that valve, and you might be able to do the rest of the system. It's not complicated, but it is a lot of labor. It's a lot of physical work, digging, sloping, trenching the pipes. So not hard, but be ready to sweat, or get your friends to come help too. So here's some pictures. The picture on the left, that is just the valve. There's the pipe coming from the house. The diverter valve is under the crawl space. One side goes back to the sewer, one side goes to the landscape. You can imagine if let's say it's from your shower and you want to dye your hair. You're in the shower, oh, I want to dye my hair. I got to go turn off my Greywater system. You do not want to have to then crawl under your house, on your belly in the crawl space. That would be very inconvenient and not really an accessible way to control the water. So if you have that situation where it's in your crawl space and it's hard to get to, you want to add a motor to it. So the motor just sits right on top of the valve. So it's basically the same system. You just add the motor to the valve, and the motor plugs in to an existing outlet. It's a low voltage switch. And then you have a switch in your bathroom, and you can just flip the switch, turn off your system, flip the switch the other way, it goes back on. So this is something that you would definitely want to have if you have a crawl space or a harder to access valve. Sometimes people have these valves in their basement. They might have, really high up pipes, and it's not hard at all to just walk down there and turn the valve. So here's some pictures. This picture is actually from San Francisco. So it's a 1-bedroom house with that's the entire yard in the picture. And it's a good example of how one shower can remove one portion of a landscape from irrigation. And in this home, their one shower is irrigating their entire yard. So you can see, what you can't see is the valve that was in a garage. It was pretty high up, and the first split of the pipes, but you can see all the rest. So half of the water is going to the kind of the upper side of the image, and the lower side is getting the other half of that shower. You can see the basins. They're quite small because this has very sandy soil, so it drains really quickly. If you have clay soil, the basins you are going to dig will be much bigger, and I'll talk in future webinars about how to size them. Today, just know that the basins the size does change based on your soil type and how much water is going to it. And then the plants are planted adjacent to the basin. So the image on the right, you can see those perennial grasses are going to be planted right by that basin, and the water is flowing in. The bottom of that irrigation valve box is fully open, so the water will just flow down through the wood chips and irrigate those plants. So here you can see the completed system on the left, and then the 1 year later picture on the right. So that's the same yard, it's just a different view of it. And these people said that they never watered their yard again. It was sufficient to just have that one shower irrigate their whole landscape. If your yard is bigger, and if you're a bigger family, you can be irrigating a larger area, and you would have, it would be probably irrigating a portion of your landscape. And I just want to pause and talk about something called backflow prevention. So this is something that water agencies know a lot about and are very concerned about, and something that you all should have some kind of basic understanding about when you're thinking about using gray water on your home, to make sure that your gray water system is going to be healthy for you and all your neighbors and everyone down the line. Oh wait, except where did it go? It's not in there. Okay, well, if it doesn't come back in a different slide, actually, I'm going to just pin that thought, and we'll come back to backflow prevention because I think I actually moved it after the pump systems. But if I didn't, we'll come back to it. So I'm going to talk about pump systems now. So you might have a site where your yard is uphill and you cannot use gravity and you want to use your shower gray water, or your site might have a big patio in between your home and your plants. Or maybe there's a big deck, or something where you can't use gravity, and so you need to pump gray water. You can definitely have a simple system that can pump gray water and move it around. And how that works is you still have to divert the gray water. You send the water into it's called a surge tank. So this is a fairly small tank, usually about 30 gallons for a single family home, like just a regular house. And the gray water flows into that tank. It's not storing it, it's just temporarily collecting it. When it fills up, that pump inside has a float switch. And so when the tank fills up, that engages the pump and it pumps out all the water into the landscape. The irrigation, like how you get the water into the landscape, is very similar to that washing machine system I showed you. It lets the unfiltered gray water go out through the tubing and the outlets, and then it gets filtered in the wood chips by the plants. So it's pretty simple, though it does need electricity. You have to be able to plug the pump in, and you do have to locate that tank. It does require a more rigorous permitting process because now you have pressurized non-potable water in your yard. And I'll talk a bit when I talk about backflow prevention in a sec, I'll talk about why that needs a bit more oversight. But that's basically how it works. And how it looks is this: the picture on the left, that home has a basement. So you can see the tank, that's a 50-gallon tank. It's standing up on the ground, gray water's coming in, there's an overflow going back to the sewer, and then it's being pumped out to the landscape. The picture on the right, that tank is buried in the crawl space, but this basically the same stuff happens. Sometimes these tanks are buried outside of the house, like right next to the house. They can be buried in the ground, but they do need to be able to be accessed for maintenance of the pump and other components. Then I do want to mention systems that filter the gray water before it goes outside. So these are called pumped and filtered systems. The more kind of simpler way to do this is to have a filter that requires manually cleaning. So how this works is you have a tank and a pump, and it pumps out the water just like the past image you saw, but it pumps it through this filter. So it's pushing with pressure through a filter. The filter is catching all the debris and lint and hair and slime and gunk and all that stuff. And then it goes out into a drip system. The picture you're seeing of drip, that's just an example of drip. That's not actually a gray water system, but just so you can see how water is coming out all around that tube, a little bit of water. So it spreads out the water over a very large area. And some landscapes need drip irrigation. Your trees and your larger plants, they don't. They'd be fine with the other form of gray water irrigation. But some landscapes would need this if you wanted to irrigate them with gray water. So this can work. The tubing for the drip, it can't be just regular old drip. It has to be a special compatible type of irrigation. So you can never just go and connect a filtered gray water into your existing irrigation system. You would be making alterations. So technically this can work. The problem with the system is it requires a person to clean the filter. And if that person doesn't do it or forgets or takes too long to do it, then the whole system clogs up and can break. So the number one source of system failure is these filters that require a person to clean them, because we're human, we forget. Who wants to clean a slimy gray water filter on Saturday? It'd be much funner to go to the park or go to the beach or anything but this. So I don't recommend these if you think you're going to be the one to clean it. If you have a professional installer do it and they have a maintenance contract, or you set up a maintenance contract with somebody where you're paying them to come on a regular basis to take care of your system, that can work. But just you remembering to do it on your own, maybe it's not going to work so well. So that's my warning. We're going to get to the more kind of complex systems that also have a filter, but this filter gets cleaned automatically by being backflushed with the potable water. So the system kind of reverses itself, and clean potable water comes through the system, cleans off all the gunk of the filter, dumps it in the sewer, and then the filter turns back the other way and is ready to go. So these kind of systems can be more longer lasting because they aren't requiring a person to, on a regular basis, clean the filter. They're a lot more expensive, they're a lot more complicated, but they are out there. They kind of are a different class of gray water in terms of, all that cost, complexity, but they can do drip irrigation if you really need that. And these are some different companies. WaterSprout is a Bay Area company. They mostly do new construction, kind of like high-end residential. New construction. The Irrigation system on the left, that can work for retrofits, though it's often done in new construction as well. And then I'm not going to talk about big gray water systems, but I do want you to know that there are large buildings using gray water, and the way it's used, the kind of technology is a bit different. It's more like standard wastewater, like on-site wastewater technology, cleaning the gray water, but it can be used to go back in to flush toilets. San Francisco has a lot of really exciting examples of these larger scale water reuse projects that are happening. So if you're interested in a bigger scale, you can look into what the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission is doing in San Francisco, and there's other examples too, but that's just a nearby place that's doing a lot of reuse. And I also want to give an example of this happening at the large scale, but a mix of the simple and the more complex systems. Evergreen Lodge is in Yosemite, and they have, it's a lodge, so there's lots of little cabins, and then they also have commercial laundry and staff housing. And so for all their little cabins, they're using these simple gravity-fed systems to irrigate the landscape right around each cabin, but there's 55 of them. So overall, they're using a lot of water, and they're irrigating a huge section of their landscape, one by one, all 55 cabins. And then on their commercial systems, they are doing a pumped and filtered system because they have tons of water in a small area, and they have to really spread it out away from the lodge. So I like this example because they're applying the technology suitably to the kind of the needs of the site, and they are mixing these different systems together. Okay, now we're going to talk about backflow prevention. With some of these gray water systems, you have dirty water, which is gray water, and you have clean water working together, and that can cause a problem. It's because the potable drinking water supply, kind of how it normally works, is there's pressurized water going to all the homes, and so it's only going in one direction. But if there's a problem with the system or a breakage in a line, there can be a time when the pressure changes and water can actually get sucked backwards through the system. So if somebody has a gray water system and they have their gray water system connected into their potable system, like maybe they have makeup water, like they're adding extra water into their system, and they do it improperly, they could create a scenario that could threaten their own household as well as their neighbors by mixing dirty water with clean water without proper protection. So this is what you don't want to do, and you want to have a good enough understanding of the concept to make sure that you follow the rules, you understand, how these things work, and you make sure your system is going to be safe for everybody. Or if you hire someone, that they are making sure it's safe for everybody. So just to kind of make sure you understand what I'm talking about, it's a little bit hard to explain. If you imagine a city water line, let's say somebody like runs over a fire hydrant, or they are doing street work and they break into the main water line, and all of a sudden the water starts gushing out, it's going to create a big suction through the system. And so if somebody else, like this neighbor over here, stuck their hose that didn't have proper hose bib that would prevent this from happening, they stuck their old hose bib into a fertilizer container. Now that fertilizer is going to get sucked out and then go to their neighbor's home. So that's what cross-connection protection is preventing, and or backflow prevention. And so your water district always wants water only going in one direction, no matter what, no matter if somebody runs into a fire hydrant or, whatever happens, they don't want any risk of this dirty water getting mixed into the clean water. And so if you have one of those systems that, like I showed at the end, that can automatically clean your filter, you're going to have backflow prevention. So if your system starts malfunctioning, you don't get your dirty water going to your neighbors. So they would ask you to put in this valve. It's a kind of a one-way valve that water can only go to your home. It can never go back no matter what happens. And it's called an RPC valve. And that's something that your water agency would ask of you if you were doing a system that was more advanced system. If you're doing the simple systems, they don't have the same concerns because they're totally separate and there's not pressurized, but these more complex systems do. And there's also, I'm going to skip air gap for now. So just to kind of get, if you're thinking, should you be thinking more about backflow prevention or not? If you're thinking about laundry to landscape, that is not a concern. Same with branch drain. These are totally separate gravity flow systems. A simple pump system, it's completely separate, but if you're getting a permit, you should be prepared to talk about backflow prevention with your permitting agency. They might ask you to, and they definitely will if you have a more complex system that has makeup water. Let's see. I just have a couple more things. Maybe I'll just finish and then we'll do questions. Does that sound good, Liz?
That sounds great.
Okay, so just a couple more things. So now taking a step back away from all these details. So you've learned a lot about Greywater. There's a lot of different systems. You have different options. They can be very simple. They can be much more sophisticated. And before you're kind of landing on what might work for you, or if you've landed on a system that you think is going to work, or if you're definitely certain you're going to use Greywater, just take a little bit of a step back and think about your overall landscape. Greywater is a great resource. There's also other things you can do in your home to conserve water. Talked about conservation at the very beginning. There's also rainwater. So you can be using these on-site waters as working together to help you transform your landscape so you're not using potable water and you're still having these lovely productive landscapes. So you might have, maybe you already have a rainwater system, or maybe you're also thinking about it. So before you plan your Greywater, just take a little time to think about, what else might you use? If you're going to have a rain tank, that kind of water is great for vegetable gardens. Where would that be situated? What other parts of your landscape are going to be really well suited for Greywater? In this picture, there are a privacy screen, like maybe it's bamboo or some other kind of tall hedge type thing that's accessible by this washing machine. So in this picture, the washing machine is going to irrigate some perennials and a privacy screen and a berry patch. It's bypassing the sitting area and the play area. Maybe that's a lawn or a low water use grass. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's wood chips. Maybe it's decompressed granite. There's lots of different materials people use in their landscapes, but Greywater is bypassing that area. There's also the shower, and that's going right to the area adjacent to that home to water the fruit trees. And then there's a rain garden, which is going to manage the extra rainwater coming off the roof, and that can create a lovely native plant garden to help soak up that water. That could be in the front yard because there's not really a lot of Greywater sources there. And then the part of the yard that doesn't have rainwater or Greywater options, that could be where really low water use, plantings go that maybe attract perennial or pollinators or other benefits you want to bring to your landscape. So if you can just really big picture think about this, not to overwhelm you, but just to stop and do a little pause to determine where would be the best place for your Greywater systems. And lastly, for the people that are doing new construction is a great time to get all the piping ready for Greywater. And I want to show a resource to you. It's on the local energy codes website, and it's a Greywater ready construction. It's actually called drought ready model ordinance. And it's something that a community could actually take up and require for all new construction in the community, that all homes are built ready to do Greywater. They don't all have to put in a system, but they can all be built ready, because it barely costs any more at all to plumb for Greywater while you're already plumbing the home. The retrofits, that's where it can be expensive. So I just want to share that resource with you. And then also a couple of manufactured systems that are out there. If you think that kind of a filtered or system is the way to go for you, there are a few out there, a couple companies. You guys can research them more on your own, and the more sophisticated systems. So they are out there. So as you think your design, your first question you want to ask yourself are, what sources of Greywater can you access? How much does your home produce? And that will determine how many plants you can irrigate. And then you'll pick a system that meets your needs based on your fixtures you can get to, how much water you have, and how much of your landscape. So that's kind of the basic steps of your design. And I want to end with some resources, and then we'll do questions. So I wrote both of these books. They're how-to books. I wrote them to help people go through that design process as well as the installation process. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, it can help you install them. And if you're going to hire someone, it can help you be prepared to do it. We also on our website have a lot of resources. We have past webinars, we have a forum, a technical forum. We have some resources in Spanish and in Mandarin. We also have a hire an installer tab, and there's more resources from Daily Acts of where to hire installers. But if you want to go for more Greywater resources, you can check out our website. And we do online classes too, kind of more in depth if you're looking for that type of education. So I will end there for questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Laura.
And it did look like there were some questions regarding storage.
Yeah, we have a number of different folks asking, where do we put the Greywater? How do we store it? Can we put it into a barrel and use a hose to transfer that water? If you could address that a little bit more, that'd be great.
Yeah, great question. So kind of, there is a system I didn't mention that can be more popular with renters, where you don't do anything, you don't change your home at all. It only works if you have your washing machine in a room that has an exterior window, and you can put the discharge hose like right out the window. So you just have to open the window, you stick the hose out the window, and then you have a barrel outside that's elevated. It goes into the barrel and you have a hose at the bottom. So that's something that people can do. To make that complying with the regulations, it's not impossible to make it complying, but it does take some thought. So if you're trying to make sure your system is code compliant, you need to know kind of some of the more details of the code, like the Greywater, when it comes out that hose, it has to go into at least 2 inches cover. So you could dig your basins around your plants, and then you could have the little locations to put the water, and you could put the hose so it's going subsurface. So that would help make your system code compliant. You do need to move the hose around for it to really irrigate. So that takes more effort. So it's a little bit kind of less, I don't want to say less successful, but it's to really have that work for a long time. It takes a little more effort. So it's great for like drought emergency, like I want to do something tomorrow and I rent and all of that. Though putting in a Greywater system can be an improvement. So if you have a working relationship with the landlord, you could ask them, maybe they would even support you to put in a Greywater system. So just because you're a renter doesn't mean that you can't do a kind of a more automatic Greywater system, but you would need to talk to the landlord, because there is some small changes that happen to the home, which I would see as a benefit, but that depends. So that's how it could work. The kind of storage question, that is a different consideration. So what I described just a minute ago, you're not storing the water at all. It's flowing out that hose into the mulched landscape. You're not storing it. Sometimes people think, I don't want to water today. I want to water tomorrow. I'm just going to store my Greywater and then water when I want to. And with unfiltered Greywater, that causes a couple of problems. Greywater on it, when you just produce it, it doesn't really smell. It's still kind of slimy and dirty a little bit, but it's not too bad. If you store gray water, it quickly turns to this really stinky, yucky water that you do not want to irrigate with. All the organic matter in the gray water starts to decompose, and that takes all the oxygen out of the water. So you lower the quality of your water if you try to store it. The legal limit is 24 hours, and kind of the logistical limit is, maybe a little longer than that. It starts to get pretty gross. The other question is, gray water, we produce it almost every day. Showers, washing machines, maybe not quite every day, depending on what fixtures you're looking at, but we produce it on this frequent basis. So when we try to store gray water, we're going to have fresh gray water coming in that's a much better quality. And so we don't really get anything from it. It's really different than rainwater. Rainwater, we have a rainy season, we have the dry season. Rainwater is pretty clean. We just have a few screens, keep out the leaves. We can store rainwater for a long time and use it when we want to. So storing rainwater, good idea. Storing gray water, problematic.
Thank you for that clarifying question. I'm kind of bouncing around the Q&A, and I would like to have you answer, how often do wood chips need to be changed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's the maintenance question. The wood chips, so once you get your system up and running, about once a year, you need to check on, once a year, you should check on your system. Sometimes you need to change the wood chips once a year. It's not the entire basin you've dug. It's usually just where the water's flowing out. So it's just a much smaller area. So sometimes they do need to be changed once a year. Sometimes they can go a couple years. It depends on a few factors, like the kind of wood chips you had and how much water went to that particular basin. But you should, in your mind, think I need to do maintenance once a year on my system.
Thank you. I'm going through this long list of questions. They're all so great. Thank you so much. Could you describe the difference between recycled water and gray water?
Yeah, so recycled water comes from a municipal treatment plant. So let's say you don't have, your home is just a standard home, shower water, sink water, toilet water, everything goes down the drain, leaves your home in one pipe, joins all your neighbors, what we call wastewater, sewage, going down the street. It all ends up in a wastewater treatment plant where they clean the water, they remove the nutrients, they disinfect it, and typically it's just discharged. But some plants do a little bit extra cleaning of that water, and then it's called recycled water. So it's regulated. So like how much of all these different potential things in the water is regulated. So they test that water, and it can be used for like golf courses and irrigation. There are some limitations on contact with the water, but it's a reusable source of water, and it usually goes to really big water users that have non-potable water. And Lauren could probably answer that question. I don't know about in Sonoma County how much water is recycled.
That is a good question. There's a recycled water treatment plant in Santa Rosa, as well as that's run through Sonoma Water. And off the top of my head, I don't actually have the stats on how many customers we provide with recycled water, but I know that the city of Santa Rosa provides a large amount of it to their ag customers. But yeah, I don't have the stats on top of my head, but I can put them in the chat in just a second when I have a moment to research on our website.
Yeah, typically it doesn't go to just a house like in Santa. It goes to the big water users if the city is an older city. But gray water is just the water you used right in your home, your shower. Now you can use that shower water on your own landscape. It's separated out, so it doesn't require the treatment because it wasn't mixed in with the toilets and all the businesses and everybody else's water. You just need to manage what you put into the water based on your products, and then it's safe to reuse on your own home in your own landscape.
Thank you. Bob has posed a nice scenario. Bob writes, when we use washer or shower, the water usage is high for shorter periods of time. Many plants prefer a lesser amount of water over longer time, especially in clay soil. How do you accommodate that?
That is a great question. So there is like what a plant ideally wants, and then there's what plants are totally happy with, which may not quite match up. If you have a newer planting, then putting it on a gray water regime, it's fine. The plant will thrive and be happy. If you have really old established plants, you definitely want to pause before you change their irrigation patterns. so that's something based on, and so Greywater, a simple Greywater system would probably change your irrigation patterns if you would put your plants on a specific, irrigation cycle for a long time. So that you might want to pause. But I've seen, we did a study where we looked at a couple of thousand plants and assessed them for plant health, and they were all irrigated with simple Greywater systems, and they were, the vast majority of them, totally healthy and thriving under kind of a range of irrigation patterns. So yes, it's true what you say is true, and in practice plants tend to just be happy by getting that water, with the caveat, don't make major changes to really established older plants, or do it more gradually maybe. And just to add on, the water does, with a clay soil, you have a bigger basin, so the water does soak down over time in the landscape, and the wood chips do soak it up. So it's not quite as kind of water, no water as you might be imagining, because there is this big buffer of all those wood chips soaking up the water and then slowly letting it go down over time.
In the same thread, Jacques asked a really great question of how thick of a layer of mulch, or how thick should the layer of mulch be?
So typically they're between 6 inches and 12 inches deep, based on the type of system and location.
Great, thank you. Good,
I'm
Lauren.
also seeing a question on, is it okay to use hot water? Like, it's going to run through your laundry system.
Yeah, and so if you think about, what hot water comes into your washing machine, and then it spends, 20 minutes or so washing the clothes, cooling down, and then it gets pumped out through the system and goes through the pipe, which is in the soil, and then lands in the wood chips. And so by the time it touches a plant root, it might be warm, but it's not going to be as hot like it was when it came into the washing machine.
Thank you.
So not a problem.
Are there special considerations for folks who are on well and septic?
Yeah, so there's setbacks from wells and septics. So you want to be 100 feet away from your drinking water well. That's where you're irrigating with gray water. And then with septics, there is a setback. I don't remember it off the top of my head. And typically, a lot of people do gray water who are on septics to keep water out of their septic, to kind of prolong the life and make sure maintenance doesn't have to happen as often. So that's a common driver for some gray water, is to keep the water out of the septic. And it can, there's several studies that have shown that the performance of the septic does better when there's less water going into it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
There's another question on where can someone purchase gray water parts?
There is an online place called Waterwise Supplies. It's a Bay Area company that sells kits. And I forgot to put that in my slideshow. And then I think Liz has local resources.
Yeah, and I'm definitely jotting down all the resources that you're sharing, Laura. Thank you. In Sonoma County, I know that Friedman's supply company has like a model of a gray water kit. They do not sell a already compiled kit, so you would have to purchase all of the pieces separately. And then there is also Wyatt Irrigation that usually you're able to purchase all of the indoor and outdoor material at the same place.
And Urban Farmer is in Marin, and they do sell kits.
I think you touched on this a little bit ago, but could you describe how you balanced the distribution of water between multiple mulch beds?
Yeah, so with the laundry to landscape system, you through the design, you're sending water pretty evenly out through the different outlets. And there's some, I don't want to get into like super weedy, like how you actually do it, because I want you to come back to the next webinar where I'll show you the parts and how to do it and all of that. But basically it's through the parts that you use and angling the tubing, and there's a couple of valves you can use in your design. So.
Thank you. Kind of in the same vein, but I would love if you could talk about the amount of water that Sonoma County or other regions get, and if it's worth to invest in rain barrels.
So any type of rain harvesting system, I mean, it's like every drop counts. that's I feel that every drop counts. Like a rain barrel is not a lot of water compared to how much irrigation a landscape uses. It will fill up instantly in a storm. and be used very quickly in the summer, but it's a great awareness builder. Like I find that one rain barrel really makes you think about rain as a resource. It often encourages people to then get a bigger tank or maybe put in a rain garden. So it can be called a gateway, not a gateway drug, but like a gateway technology, because it's so cute and small and easy, and you can paint it and it's easy to set up. So there is value to it for sure. And the value may not be in the 50 gallons. So if everybody saved 50 gallons, that's a lot of water. The value may be in how it shifts your thinking about water and awareness of how much water that we use.
Absolutely. Thank you. Can you discuss how to set up a greywater system if you have a concrete slab foundation?
Yeah, so I would look at your washing machine first. And if your washing machine is in an exterior wall, then you can go right out the wall. If it's in a room that is an interior room, then sometimes, like if you imagine where it is, there's like a closet you could run the pipe through, or maybe behind the back of a toilet if there's a bathroom in between the laundry and the outdoors. But you do have to get a pipe outside, like straight through the wall. So you could put it against the wall and like cover it with like a chase or something. But I've often seen people work around, like because it's a bathroom and they can just go behind the toilet, or because there's some closet they can go through, or some kind of unobtrusive place for that pipe. It's a 1-inch pipe and you can paint it, but it would stick out by about a little more than 1 inch off the wall. And then with a shower, you could maybe put an outdoor shower in, or wait until you have a big remodel need and plumbing change need.
Thank you. Can you reiterate why you would or would not hook up a sink to greywater?
Is that kitchen or bathroom?
They just write sink option.
The bathroom sink, the lavatory bathroom sink, that can often be really easily combined with the shower and is used, commonly. It's not a lot of water, so it's probably not worth it in most situations to do a whole separate system just from your bathroom sink. But if you can combine it, then it adds to the shower system. The kitchen sink is not considered greywater in California currently, though, it's kind of a long story of why that's true. And it's not based on science, it's based on kind of perception and historic perceptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're getting close to the end of the questions for now. And I know Mariah is no longer with us, but she brings up a great point about working with a plumber to get a shower and sink system set up, but was discouraged and was told that the permitting process was going to be extensive and the cost would be prohibitive. Have you had similar experiences or any suggestions for folks working with contractors?
Yes, so my suggestion is if you want greywater, don't take no for an answer. Contractors and plumbers will often, they don't want to delay. It might be new to them. They don't like new things. They're busy. They just tell you no. I mean, I've heard of, plumbers and contractors telling people it was illegal in their county when their county actually incentivized it. So it was a complete lie, like just absolutely not true. So if you're getting an answer that you don't want, I would don't believe, they know how to do stuff, but they might not know about greywater. So I would call the city, talk to Daily Acts, Greywater Action. We can support you to find support, but just don't take no for an answer. Mm-hmm. And make sure you get the plumbing done before they're finished, even if it delays the project, because once it's all the walls are done and the floors and everything, it's much harder to go back.
I know we will talk about this, I think, in almost a moment, but there are some cities that provide rebates for greywater kits as well.
Absolutely. Maybe we can get this last question answered very quickly and then dive into the remaining slides for those of you that are still on the line. Thank you so much. We have some really great resources to share in just a moment. But we have Miriam asking, is it okay to collect the washing machine greywater and pour it directly on the soil?
Is it okay? I can't answer those questions quickly because there's the code, what the code says, there's what I think you should do, and then there's what you could do. And they're kind of like all different answers. But as a practice, putting greywater directly on the soil will clog up the soil particles and you'll get stagnant water on top. So if you're doing it in the same area, if you do it like once here and once over there, and then you won't see a problem. But mulch is a much better medium to filter the greywater and soak it up.
Absolutely. I know I said the last question was good, but I feel like Jacques has just asked a really great question. He writes, after you've completed the installation, how can you know that you've installed successfully, assuming that you've done this yourself?
Oh, so before you bury everything, and you actually come to the next class because we'll talk more about it,
Love
but
that.
before you bury everything, you test it and check the flows and make sure everything's going as designed. And then you cover everything up and feel like you're really done. And then you check it again.
So we'll see you at the next class, Jacques. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and share screen. And then I know there are a couple more questions coming in, but we want to wrap up with some of our additional resources. Alrighty, so as Lauren was just mentioning, there are a number of different rebates within the municipalities and different cities in Sonoma County, but we really want to encourage folks, if you want Greywater, check out your municipal website. I'm sure there are, if not Greywater rebates, other rebates to conserve water. And as Laura mentioned, every drop counts. So please check out your city rebate programs. We will be sending follow-up links for the following cities and their webpage and rebate programs. And then I think at this time, if folks still have a couple of minutes, I would love to put out a poll and get a sense of how are you feeling after this presentation? Do you have a new sense of knowledge, or what more can we share with all of you? So ideally, this will take just a minute or two, and I will go ahead and read some of these questions out loud. Please feel free to answer as we go. Our first question is, are you leaving this program with a new understanding of Greywater? Have you learned a lot? Did you have an understanding before and are still learning more? Did you know most of what was discussed, but still enjoyed the presentation? And if you cannot see the full answers, feel free to extend your screen. Question number 2, do you feel more inclined to install a Greywater system in your home? Yes, no, not sure. Question 3, would a rebate provided by your utility, your water utility, influence your decision to install a Greywater system? Yes, that would help, or no. Number 4, what might be a barrier to installation? And if you do not see an answer on the following options, please feel free to write in the chat what might be an additional barrier for you. We have listed cost of an installation, your physical ability, having confidence in your design, maybe the access to tools. Are you having difficulty finding a qualified installer? Or are you having a hard time with the permit process? I think in the previous rebate question, I neglected to mention that there is a website called quell.net, which is another resource for you to find a local installer. And I will be sure to share some of the resources, whether that be Quell or the resources that Laura mentioned through Greywater Action to hire an expert. I'll share that in the follow-up email. I'm going to give the poll just another minute because we're almost at full completion. And I will share the responses, but they will be anonymous. Thank you all for responding. Okay, I'm going to count it down. Get your last submissions in. Maybe 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, ending poll. Now I'm going to share the results. So for the first question, are you leaving this program with a new understanding of Greywater? For the most part, a lot of people are. I'm really happy to hear that. And a lot of you did have a general understanding, but are still leaving with new knowledge. So that's really great to hear. Okay, we're kind of in the middle. Not sure if people want to install a Greywater system after this, but also a lot of people feeling inspired and more inclined to install. Would a rebate by your water utility influence your decision? Majority of people have said yes. And barrier to installation. This is a question that I really appreciate your response with. So mix opinions here, from cost to confident design, finding an installer. It looks like there are a variety of different reasons why folks may or may not be inclined to install. Alrighty, thank you so much everybody for taking that poll. I'm going to go ahead and stop that share. Okay, so now I just want to talk about a few more opportunities to elevate your Greywater education. As we were mentioning, this is a 3-part series in collaboration with the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership and Laura with Greywater Action. So next Thursday on October 21st, we are going to take a deeper dive into all things laundry to landscape gray water. If you're excited about this do-it-yourself opportunity, I highly recommend you attend this program. I think you're going to leave feeling much more inspired and empowered than you were today. And then one of the last weeks in October, Thursday, October 28th, we're going to take an even deeper dive into permitted systems. So this is I kind of look at this series as a 100 class, a 101, and a 102. So this is going to be for more advanced systems. It's going to be incredibly educational and valuable. And then lastly, Daily Acts is partnering with the city of Petaluma and the city of Cotati to host 2 Greywater installations. This weekend will be in Petaluma, and we are going to be offering our community hands-on opportunity to install at a renter's home. You'll be able to learn how to cut, measure, glue, and dig mulch basins. If you're interested in gaining this hands-on opportunity, whether that be in Petaluma or Cotati, I suggest you look at our website this evening as our signups are reaching our capacity. So we have limited space, but please do not hesitate to sign up on our wait list. And that's going to be all for this evening. I know, well, we're almost at time. We have 2 more minutes. Maybe we can answer 1 question or 2, but please do not hesitate to reach out if you have any additional questions. I cannot reiterate enough that we will be sharing the recording and resources, and we hope to see you all at the next event. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Looking at the chat, we have a lot of appreciations being shared. Thank you all so much. We've got 1 more question that I can't help but answer, or at least address right now. Rachel is wondering, Laura, if you could talk more about the tank buried in the crawl space. How long do they last and what kind of maintenance is required?
The pumps are going to be the probably most needs to be replaced soonest out of all the different components. And if you get a high quality gray water pump, it should last a long time. I don't really want to say a number, but I would say at least 8-10 years. If you get a cheap pump, then it will last maybe a couple years and you'll have to replace it. So cheap is not always actually cheap if you have to keep replacing things. So they are the ones that don't try to filter the water beforehand, don't have a lot of issues. Though of course your pump is eventually going to break. Did I answer all the parts to that question?
I think you did. And should Rachel have any more questions, hopefully she can reach out to us, or we'll see her in the follow-up presentations. Rachel has confirmed you answered it all. Thank you, Laura. We are having a lot of gratitude shared in the chat. I really appreciate this collaboration and everybody who was able to attend tonight. And if you're watching this recording, thank you to you as well. I hope to see a number of you in next week's presentation. I think with that, we can wrap. Laura, as always, thank you for your expertise and knowledge and your patience through all of this. We're all learning together, and we so greatly appreciate everything that you've shared tonight. All right.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everybody. Have a great evening. Take care.